Hey everyone, welcome back to G&G LinkedIn Live. As you can see, today Gurpreet is not with me because she's out there kicking butt and helping a client do amazing work. But I'm luckily joined by my friend Elisa Garn, who is an amazing HR outlier who sits at the intersection of brand and people and design thinking and human experience and even some HR in there too, which we'll forgive her for. And we're here to talk about design thinking, which is one of my favorite topics. I think it is so valuable for people to understand how to use it when it comes to a work context. I mean, we were talking before we went live. Elisa was talking about another way to use it, even beyond what I had been thinking of. It's really such a helpful set of tools. And so I'm going to toss it over to Elisa to describe, for a lot of people who aren't familiar with it, what is design thinking?
So I have to admit, full disclosure, design thinking is relatively new to me in my career as well. I had never really heard about it, at least not in the way that it was communicated to me until my last company. My CEO latched onto this idea almost obsessively. And so it was kind of mandated, like everybody learn it. We are entrenching this into our culture. And what I found very quickly as I was learning it was, holy smokes, this is an amazingly powerful tool if used correctly within the world of HR. So essentially what I took it to mean, and I'm sure there's various definitions out there, and by the way, this is not like a new thing. This has been around for decades. It's just, for whatever reason, I think because technology is on the rise, become a lot more popularized again. So how I view design thinking is it's essentially putting your customers' core need at the center of what you design and implement. So that could be everything from a policy and a practice to, my mom has a soap making business. When she builds out her soaps, she's often thinking about what are the needs of her customers, to all the way to software and technology products that we use on a daily basis. So the applicability of how you can use design thinking in virtually any environment to solve just about any problem, the whole reason you do it is to drive adoption. Because I know that for me, I have been so frustrated many times in my career where I just put my heart and soul into building out a really cool program or a wellness initiative or something that I just know everyone's going to love as much as I do. And then I implement it and it falls flat. And I'm always so disappointed. And I don't know how long it took me to figure out that I was the problem. But eventually I figured out I was the problem. I was building solutions for Elisa Garn, not for the needs of my customers, which were typically employees and managers and executives. So the design thinking, there's a few different twists on the philosophy, but in most scenarios that you'll see 5 to 7 step process. And the first one is always the empathy mapping stage. This is really where you're going out and asking questions, trying to understand, not the what. So it's not the what that your customer is asking for. For example, people always use that analogy of if Ford had asked people what they wanted, then they would have told them they wanted a faster horse. So that's a what solution or answer instead of a why. When you get to the why, what people ultimately wanted with that was they wanted to get to their destination faster and safer. So once he figured that out from a psychology level, he was able to develop a product that met the why, the needs of that customer, instead of giving them the what that they were asking for. And to me, that's been the magic of design thinking is you ask the questions and you evaluate and you empathize in a way that really helps you better understand your customer so they don't have to tell you what they want. Instead of asking at the end of a seminar, what did you think of today's presentation? What other topics would you like to see? You're not trying to get at them coming up with these responses for you because the likelihood that that's going to actually meet their expectations is very low. But if you better understand their why do you want to see a conference related to that particular subject? Is there something happening within your business or your organization that you need help solving? Then you can better design a process or a program or a solution that gets to that core why rather than, again, the external what or even the how. How would you fill in the gaps there? How did I do?
I thought you did great. For me, in my learning about design thinking, because everything that you talked about was certainly aligned with what I've learned. But one, I remember reading a while ago, there was an article talking about how different practitioners define design thinking. And I don't remember it precisely, but essentially, depending on if you were early, intermediate, or advanced, you saw it differently. And the one thing I do remember is that the people who were most advanced and been doing it for years saw it as a set of tools. A set of tools to be able to create better user-centric designs. That's ultimately what it is. And like you said, if there's 5 stages, 6 stages, 7 stages, whatever it is, the process takes you from the empathize or empathy stage, whereas you fully understand your user. And like you said, not what the user thinks the problem is, but really delve in through research, through asking the right questions, through the right tools of understanding what the user is ultimately looking for. And then next would become the define stage, which is defining what is the issue at hand. Because coming from, like you said, so with Henry Ford, to use that example, he empathized, understood what the issue was, that the horses or the cars weren't going fast or safe enough. So to define the issue, he said, how might we get to a place quicker and safer? Right? So then that's the define stage. So for you, what's some experience you have, because we'll get to the other stages as we move along in the conversation. So for you, starting back at the empathize stage, what are some of the tools or what are some of the things that you've done at that stage to help you set you up for success? Because that is of paramount importance, right? That if you miss on the empathize stage, every stage thereafter is going to continue miss in a worse direction. So what's some of the experience you have around that and to make sure that you're doing that successfully?
That's a really great question, which leads into why I think design thinking often is overwhelming to a lot of people when they first start learning about it, because it seems like it has to be this highly organized, like mapped out process. And really, like, stage one is my favorite part because it means I get to talk to people. And I think that the key here is understanding that all information can lead to contribution to what you're ultimately trying to get to, like you said, in the define stage. So this can be done through, I've done it through focus groups, which are a little bit more formalized, and you have a set of questions and you kind of let the conversation go where it goes. Moderating that can be difficult for some people that don't have experience in moderating panels or, guiding discussions, especially if you have a mixed group of people that are highly vocalized and or people that you just have to like pull and pull and pull to get them to engage. If you're not an experienced moderator there, that can be very challenging. But I think that especially in HR, like, you're talking to people all the time. Like, every meeting is an opportunity to garner feedback, even just like on the fly, very pulse related information about, hey, I'm thinking about this particular project, or I know that we have this problem to solve as a company, or I'm trying to better align my strategies with what the company is working on. Can I run something past you real quick? And then you give them a little 30-second overview of your idea, or, even just like trying to understand, like, tell me from your point of view, like, what is the issue with this challenge? Or, where are we trying to go as a company? And as you're gaining all of that feedback, again, like, I think the expectation is you have to have it all documented and it's, in this beautiful Word document that's all compartmentalized by chapters, and you have a table of contents. And I think that's a bunch of malarkey. I think that the best feedback you're going to get is almost the impulsiveness of conversational feedback that you can then take and hopefully make it a little bit more formal, because you don't want all of your information to be anecdotal. But I do think, from my own experience, the best way I've been able to do this is a blend of some on the fly, in the moment, conversational, you're waiting for a meeting to start, all the way to highly organized focus groups that are moderated, and then, going through the cycle effectively as you pilot the things that you're looking at a small scale. The cycle starts over again, and you're continuing to engage that audience into, what did I meet the mark? Is this meeting those expectations? Is this actually driving it? The feedback that you provided to me in the early stages.
So I love what you started that with. Aside from thank you for using the word malarkey. Thank you for doing that. I'm not sure if we're 100% live right now. Do you mind if I verify that quickly?
I mean, I see a little red box that says live, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't mind.
I need to verify on Gurpreet. Doesn't look live. Sorry, hold on one second.
It's okay.
Oh, no, we are. Sorry about that, everyone. I don't know why. This is my first time running this, so thank you for understanding any technical difficulties we have, because it's not connecting up to comments.
There's no comments.
It's not. So I don't know, but anyway, it seems we are live, which is wonderful. So I want to circle back then to what you were talking about, how people feel very overwhelmed when they first see design thinking. And I think that's a very, very common feeling. I know I felt it. Most people I've spoken to have felt it, because you see these defined stages and you see a lot of tools that go into each of the stages. So you're not sure, how can I partake in this without knowing everything? And I think you're really making a great point that anytime you're talking to somebody is an opportunity for feedback, is an opportunity to empathize, an opportunity to understand, am I going in the right direction at my stage? And it doesn't need to be with all of the nice post-it notes in the whiteboard and all of that. And you don't need to be an expert to benefit from the impact of design thinking. And I think that's a really, really great point you're bringing up, that people shouldn't feel completely overwhelmed by it. People shouldn't feel that it's something that I can't do any of it because I don't know all of it. And by starting small, and by starting, like you're saying, just with conversations, understanding what the problem is, the real problem is, from that person's perspective. So I love that. So we've gone through the empathize. Oh, sorry.
It does take a pretty strong emotional intelligence skill set to do this well, at least for certain aspects of this. And I think that when I think about the application of this in the technology sector, UX, UI designers are not always the best at EQ. However, they know the information they're trying to get at. And so a lot of the experiences I've had with UX, UI groups going through design thinking is very, very different than anything that is more of a human-centric product or service or something. So, if you're trying to get at this is how we're building out the platform, or this is how we're thinking of designing the flow process, those things are very transactional. And there's not usually an emotion tied to it. And so design thinking from that point of view, I'm not going to say it's easier, but I think it's possibly, maybe it is a little bit easier to adapt the philosophies, because you can use it a little bit more cookie cutter, black and white, do these things, ask these questions, write this down, iterate, go back. But when you're talking about something that has a human element to it, for example, your onboarding process or your application process or your learning methodology that you use inside your company, all of those have touch points that directly relate to an emotional response of an individual, not even like a holistic employee population, but an individual. So I know it's not the topic for today, but I think design thinking and journey mapping for HR, I mean, you want to talk about modern HR, like magic sauce, because you'd use the design thinking to understand all of those critical points. And then you can journey map it out to understand, we need to get this person from here to here to here. If they deviate from here, if they have a bad experience, we know that ahead of time, that there's an opportunity. We can go back and essentially frame what that's going to look like if there is an error off of one of those critical touch points, to make sure to realign them as quickly as possible. I know you've got some great graphics for this and some of the things that you do, Gil, but this is what I really like to talk about with HR people who don't understand, or maybe don't see that there is a more progressive way to our profession that is becoming higher and higher in demand. I think there's still a very large population of HR professionals that think our biggest value is compliance, benefits administration, payroll management, and employee relations. And I am not here to say that those things are not critically important to a CEO, but there is a more informed way to be doing some of the services that we offer for a more adoptive, progressive workforce for employees that are demanding a difference in employee experience that I think has an impact. And as design thinking plays into that, it really is one of the most effective methods to make sure that you are building workplaces that are going to drive adoption, that are going to drive higher productivity, that are going to, in turn, make employees feel more satisfied and whole, and they go home at the end of the day and they're better partners and they're better parents and they're better neighbors. Like, that's the amplification ripple effect of creating a better world done through a profession that I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be. I mean, that's such an amazing opportunity to leave a legacy of influence. But I could go back and ask people that I was doing benefits for and payroll 10 years ago, and none of them are going to say, oh my gosh, I got paid on time every 2 weeks, and that was like the best. Thanks, man. It's an expectation. It's like a lowest common denominator of like, that just should be. But what else? Like, how are you showing up inside your organization that is acting at and creating value at the same level of some of the other maybe more celebrated or more visual functions within the business?
I love what you just articulated there on so many levels, so much there to unpack. But what really I love about it is that you're articulating that there's a better way of doing things. That historically business, HR has been done in a certain way at people, right? And other areas of the organization have found value. Because like you said, design thinking is not new. It dates back to the 50s or 60s in that it was used for physical design projects. And then more areas of the organization recognized, wait a minute, there's value in being user-centric. And like you said, there's not really many better ways that I know of as a structure, as an organized way of doing that than design thinking. Than to really understand what makes our user tick. How do I get this persona or this group of personas? What makes them tick? How can I define a problem that actually matters to them, right? Not the problem that I think matters to them, not making sure, they're getting paid on time, which, like you said, is baseline table stakes. But how do I design that experience where they felt taken care of, where they felt connected to the organization, where they felt lifted up, and ultimately creating the most productivity for them, right? Mm-hmm. Because when we're engaged, when we're happy, when that makes us productive. And by designing around the user, it's so helpful to find this new way. But I want to go back to also to what you're saying about the human aspect, how, doing a design project for an app is very different than doing a design project for an onboarding experience. And I want you to help then, maybe because a lot of our audiences around either small and medium businesses or HR people in organizations. Can you help people understand a little bit of what you've learned about that, how you found that different? Because it's important that, as the topic is design thinking in HR, how can you help HR people make sure that they're doing that effectively?
Well, I don't even think you have to title it. Like, I don't know if it necessarily needs a name for you to be doing it inside your organization. I mean, if that's more helpful for you to get buy-in and you're trying to also get it entrenched into other parts of the business, that's great. But especially small to mid-sized business, one of the huge David versus Goliath advantages that small to mid-sized businesses have is the ability to adapt very much more quickly than a large conglomerate organization that takes, decades to transform. So even if you're just starting with a very, very small project to adapt this to, one of the first ones that we used was, at the time I was working for a travel management company. And so a lot of the design thinking that we were doing was very customer focused. And so that was all the training we were getting. That was all of the, the experimenting that we were doing. But in turn, like I was taking that back to my team and saying, okay, so here's what we learned about need statements today. Now we're going to go and do this and create some personas for our employees. And one of the very first things that we noticed was the difference in generations that we had in the organization. And, building personas can get a little tricky in HR because I've heard feedback before that people get really concerned that this is an opportunity to inject bias. And that is very, very likely if you're not doing this correctly. So sometimes having a coach or a mentor or a consultant on the side that is walking you through this process the first couple of times is valuable, because what you don't want to do is get started down this road and then all of a sudden you have personas that are really like borderline illegal segments of your employee population that, you might have good intent where you're trying to build out processes or experiences to align with their needs. But what you've effectively done is you've created disparate impact. So there could be some gray area there that I'm not encouraging you go into this blindly. There's plenty of books out there if you want to get an introduction to it. But again, I think it's really just starting small. Start with one thing that you want to accomplish, go through this process. And it's the coach that we worked with brought up the infamous 80-20 rule. Like everything that you're going to learn, you could learn to the ends of the earth, everything that exists about design thinking, and you're going to know about 20%. Because the magic of design thinking, of really what you learn to put that in more internal, the 80% is through application and trial and error and practice. And like, it really does become a muscle memory thing of you have to go out and do it over and over and over and over again before you're actually going to get good at it. Because if you try it once and it fails and you give up and throw up hands and say, well, design thinking doesn't work. It didn't work that time, but you learned a few things from it in order to fuel, hopefully, your next experience of doing it in a more effective way. It's interesting, when we're talking about the application in HR, I remember I worked for a medical device engineering for a few years, and Six Sigma was like, everyone had to be Six Sigma certified in some way. I never got my green belt, but I did go to the trainings. And one thing I learned there too is, okay, I'm an HR person. I'm not an engineer, but there's a lot of these methodologies that can apply. Like 5S was a big deal. We had 5S Fridays, and, we all had to go and completely anally organize our desks and clean everything. But that ended up having an amazing impact on our organization, even just culturally. Like, it brought us together, and it was this thing that we all did, and our workplace felt fresher. It was clean. We didn't have that one person that sits in the corner. I call him Jan. Jan never cleans her office and has like boxes of Cheez-Its and like Tootsie Roll wrappers and stuff in the bottom of her desk. We didn't have any of that because there was a shared expectation of how we work together. And, we had this as tradition, if nothing else. So embedding that type of style thinking into your organization as it relates to design thinking, I mean, how cool would it be if you had finance and accounting doing this? That just seems like such a how would that work situation. But finance and accounting has a lot of touch points to employees and consumers that are on the back end that don't even really get considered. But everything from like, how do our customers get our invoice? And how do they want to pay us? Does it make sense for us to go out and use a design thinking methodology to figure out how we can get paid more efficiently, faster? And then what do we do if there's disruption in, like, if they dispute the charges, like thinking through how we apply design thinking, all the elements of the business, it really is with the intent to make the business operate more efficiently and effectively So you have scalability. I mean, that's like a CEO's dream boat. So getting everybody on board and aligned with that, you see one department like HR getting it right. That's a pretty cool way to showcase the talent that you bring to the table instead of being the person that follows suit because somebody else introduced it, you know?
Well, you also talked about alignment just there, and one of the things that I've also found that is by including people internally in these decisions in the design process, it makes change management that much easier, because instead of needing to convince people why you're doing something, people are already on board and they are why you're doing something, and they've been involved in the decision-making process. In our last few minutes here, I do want to just go through the last few stages, however you describe them, 5 stages, 6 stages, whatever it is. So we've talked about empathize, we've talked about define, but we haven't really talked specifically that what to do after that. So you've defined a problem. What do you do at that point? How do you then move an issue through the process from there?
So you're testing my memory here, and I have a great visual. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. Sarah Gibbons is the consultant who she has a lot of visuals that I've attached to personally the most, and I believe
is that
hers
from
is a
Nielsen
6
Norman?
Yes. Oh my gosh, she's like, I have fangirl crushes on some of my professional colleagues. Like, this is way inappropriate. Like, I would cut off her skin and wear it to my birthday party. She is like the epitome of who I want to be when I grow up. Sarah is
That is a first
amazing.
for G&G LinkedIn Live. That's the first time that's ever been said on G&G.
Well, I go for first, you know? Actually, while we're doing this, I'm just going to pull up her visual and see if maybe I can share it. And if not, I'll at least go through her steps. So bear with me a second here.
No worries.
You can hear me clacking away. And she also, by the way, Sarah has a lot of free videos through their website, and I think a lot of them are on YouTube as well, that you can go in and use. Like, she gives this information away for free, but man, she really is brilliant. So I'm going to do my best to share my screen here, see if we can make this work. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. You see that okay?
Hold on 1 second. I have to add this to, there you go. Now it's on there.
Okay, thank you. So this is the visual that she created. And again, she added another step here. The traditional design thinking methodology is, you talked about those first two, the empathize and define. This is the understand portion of the methodology. Next, you have ideate and prototype, which is more of the exploration part of the cycle, and then tests, or a lot of times this gets called pilot. The one that she felt was missing, that I tend to agree with her, is this one, implement. I think it's really common that we go through all of this and then never actually put anything into action. And design thinking really is just a principle and is going to stay in the thinking stage if there's not an implementation ask attached to it. So this particular cycle is the one that I like the most. Didn't spend as much time on the ideate and prototype and test, but ultimately this is really where you're going to be spending the majority of the time, because this is where you have to make sure that you have that solid foundation of what am I solving before you get into the build, which is, historically, I look at my HR career and most HR professionals I talk to, this is usually where they start. Maybe arguably in define, but the ideate and prototype is very commonly like, okay, there's a problem, I have to jump right in and solve it. And that's where they end up solving through their lens instead of the lens of whoever their audience or adopters are or tend to be.
I just want to interrupt there, because I think that's such a key point about how traditionally HR and leaders in general start often, if you're lucky, at the ideate stage. If not, they're just actually coming at the end of their own ideate stage and telling you what to implement. right? And so whereas the value in this design thinking, in this new way of thinking, is that by understanding, having the humility to know that you are not your user, you don't have all the answers that are in your user's head, and you don't know exactly what their problems are. So unless you dive into that first, then you can create better ideas and come up with better solutions. So Elisa, thank you so much for coming on. I think we're going to have you and maybe your friend Mickey on to talk about journey mapping at some point, because you touched on a great topic there, because that would be a lot of fun. Really appreciate you having you on. Is there anything before we end, anything you want to close with?
Really, the only point I was going to make, which is a good wrap up anyway, is you'd mentioned you were not the end user. I would encourage everyone that hears that to understand the empathy that it takes for you, individual, if somebody is trying to solve your problems without asking you your needs. We all know what that feels like, whether that's been through a spouse or a boss or a child. And so I think being able to put yourself in that position to understand how it feels, you're going to be a better professional and you're going to get better adoption if you can use a methodology like this to put the user at the core of the solution that you create for them. So that was the only other thing I was going to add, but I really appreciate the invitation to join you. And I would love to be on again soon to talk about journey mapping. That's like, whoa.
We'd love to have you. Thanks so much.
Yes, thanks again.
So much for joining us. And we'll be back on Thursday with another episode. I believe we have another guest. So every Monday and Thursday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, Gurpreet and I talk about SMB and helping organizations bridge the gap between the company and the people. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.